Good evening from New York. This is Wednesday, October 5th, 398 days until the 2012 presidential election. Thousands marched, thousands more nationwide walked out, unions representing still hundreds of thousands more endorsed, and a statement, the first list of grievances and truths, was declared. In our fifth story in the countdown, Occupy Wall Street roars through New York City, its ranks swelling as members of the AFL-CIO, the United Auto Workers, and the Transit Workers Union join in. This, as a growing number of Democratic lawmakers say it's about time. The lowest estimate of the crowd that marched the mile between Foley Square and its courthouse and City Hall to Zuccotti Park this afternoon, just off Wall Street, at least 10,000 per the New York Daily News. Also, the Financial Times quoting that number. ABC News now with its own live Occupy Wall Street blog, going with as many as 15,000. Some organizers claiming 30,000, but to be fair, organizers claimed there were only 15,000 in Foley Square as the march began. The lowest estimate, however, under the circumstances, is still huge. Crowds stretching 12 blocks, chanting all day, all week, Occupy Wall Street. Among them, one Elizabeth Carey Smith and her infant daughter.
We basically cannot survive in New York, regardless of how hard we work, because we cannot afford health care, we cannot afford child care. And I can't imagine if this is what it's like now, what is it going to be like when she's older? Is it going to be worth it to her to pay for an education that is economically useless? For her not to have opportunity, I mean, isn't that what capitalism was supposed to be about?
Countdown contributor, the actor and activist Mark Ruffalo, was also there.
This corporate cronyism, this greed, this infiltration of our regulatory services and systems, the whole-handed sell-off of the EPA, all of these people here come from all walks of life in all different groups that are fighting those very things.
People from all walks of life, including today many union members who are out in force.
I hope that the labor movement can bring that energy into their movement and join up with their movement and say, you know what, this is a working class movement. This is not a movement about just a bunch of young people that have nothing better to do in their life, but this is an issue that the labor movement has been fighting about for over 100 years already.
And today, the United Federation of Teachers lent its support to the movement, and AFL-CIO leader Richard Trumka not only getting behind it, but also issuing specific demands. First, that big corporations should invest some of the $2 trillion in cash they have on hand and use it to create good jobs. Second, banks should be making more credit accessible to small businesses instead of parking almost $1 trillion at the Federal Reserve. Third, stop foreclosures. Banks should write down the 14 million mortgages that are underwater and stop the more than 10 million pending foreclosures. And fourth, fund education and jobs by taxing financial speculation. Education, a major concern among protesters here and across the country. Today, students at more than 100 colleges nationwide walking out of class to signal their solidarity with the Wall Street protesters and to call for more affordable education and loan forgiveness. Meantime, Democratic Congress members continuing to jump on board. As we reported last night, the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Progressive Caucus have pledged support. Today, more Democratic leaders following that direction. Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, the fourth-ranking member of the party's House caucus, saying today the silent masses aren't so silent anymore. Russ Feingold, the former Democratic senator from Wisconsin, calling the movement long overdue and saying, I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing. People around the country are finally organizing to stand up to the huge influence of corporations on government and our lives, and adding, this is like the Tea Party, only it's real. It remains to be seen how much this real movement will impact national politics or when they will shake off some of the tone deafness expressed at the White House. Press Secretary Jay Carney today using the protests as a way to push the president's agenda and defend his record.
There are Americans out there who are understandably frustrated with the economy. This is exactly why the president is, despite Bill's contempt, barnstorming around the country, arguing for the urgent need for Congress to act on the American Jobs Act. Need I remind you that this president fought, and it wasn't always pretty, to make sure that we passed sweeping consumer protections in the Financial Reform Act that was opposed by Congress.
Thanks for that, Sparky. Joining me now, Errol Lewis, political anchor of New York One News and co-author and editor of Deadline Artists. Thanks for coming in again.
Good to see you.
As I said, maybe it's over 10,000, maybe it was way over 10,000. Given where this movement was a few weeks ago with straggling numbers, declining numbers there of a few hundred, given the passivity of this city politically in the last 20 years, contextualize what the size of a crowd like that means.
Oh, sure. Well, look, there are labor protests all the time that'll turn out a couple of thousand people, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people. They'll shout and they'll bang drums and they'll have a lot of specific issues and so forth, and it will come and go and almost not get noticed. It won't disrupt the city. The press doesn't really take that much notice. This is huge for New York City, for this to have been done, not by somebody running for office, not by a bunch of labor unions who are trying to get through a contract negotiation, but that it really just kind of happened. And when they say leaderless resistance, it's tweets, and it's a mistake to sort of put too much on the social media aspect of it.
Right.
There's something genuine going on out here, and I think it has hit New York in the head like a 2x4. If you didn't understand what was going on here, the 700 arrests were clue number one. This is clue number two. This is big, this is real, this is unusual for New York or anywhere else.
And the other unusual thing about it, Errol, that I've been seeing in the coverage of it, just the blog postings and even some of the mainstream reporting just in the last few hours, it's not just talking about, obviously, we've got the union influence now in here, which is, although this is ad hoc compared to what the unions normally do, it is something the unions can sink their teeth into as well, and obviously an ally situation between the two of them. But you're also getting these wonderful anecdotal reports of policemen on the scene basically saying, you know, if I weren't working, I'd probably be out there and trying not to get caught on camera. It's a very interesting group that's sort of going with the protesters who clearly were not there 2 weeks ago. Is that your impression?
Absolutely,
Who's coming
absolutely.
along?
I've heard on some call-in shows people from Wall Street saying that, look, tens of thousands of us are getting laid off. You know, people might think that we're all a bunch of fat cats, but there are about maybe 150,000 people at the top of the pyramid who are doing really, really well. And there are a lot of people further down the food chain who are getting cut like you can't believe. The financial center has dispersed. The jobs are going overseas. The jobs are vanishing. The jobs are being automated. A lot of folks are in a lot of pain. And when they see these folks making these demands, and that it's not blind, and it's not violent, and it's not stupid, and it's not infantile, I think some people are starting to make contact. And you know, you go down there, and it's completely open.
Right.
Nobody asks who you are or why you're there. Anybody can walk through, and you see signs, and there's a bookshelf, and you can look at what people are reading, and there's all these different debates going on among different factions. It's really a very interesting place to get a quick education in what's on a lot of people's minds.
And as you say, it's hitting the city as a 2x4 might. Is that because the city, it's not easy to draw a crowd when you have a sign that says, I want this by this time, and it better be, and by the way, we have to get this done for the 6 o'clock news, as opposed to this kind of, now it's beginning to seem like an extraordinary positive that it's a little more amorphous than that. It is not so finely tuned. It's like, well, what is your complaint? Maybe we can include that in this.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the fact that it's normally very orderly, that demonstrators and police have arranged and it's choreographed and the press is in on the whole thing.
It's a square dance.
And it's all done in time for the, you know, and look, that's fine. It's a demonstration. You're supposed to demonstrate support. Well, this is a little more than a demonstration. They're not just demonstrating. They're trying to do something here. And I think what's really unusual is, unlike everybody else in New York, they're not looking for fame or power or money or all of the above if they can get it, which is what's on most people's minds. They're just here to try and get people to think about a lot of different issues.
Where are the New York politicians on this? I mean, this is a weird town. You've got a conservative Democrat who's basically run as a Republican 3 times as mayor, who did a deal with the Democratic leader of the city council so that they could eliminate term limits, and then maybe she becomes the mayor after he retires. It's a weird, not finely cut Republican versus Democratic town. But have there been no New York politicians who said, wait a minute, I like these people, they might like me?
Oh, they were out in the crowd today,
as
a matter of fact. Oh, yeah, and the beautiful thing was none of them were allowed to speak. I mean, who would you ask, right? I mean, this is the thing about a leaderless movement. So out in the crowd was a guy named Vito Lopez. He's the head of the Brooklyn Democratic Party. It's the largest Democratic Party, the second biggest in the country.
Yeah.
It's huge, and there he was out in the crowd, and somebody running for the Manhattan Borough president. He wants to run for mayor, Scott Stringer. He was out in the crowd, kind of circulating around. The head of the Working Families Party was out there. There are a lot of people who are normally the big players, the big cheese. Everybody kind of runs and has to find out what they're going to do or what they're going to say. They're taking a back seat, and they're looking with interest because they know how hard it is to get 20,000 people out in the street.
Right.
And so to that extent, I think they've certainly proved something. Maybe people should have figured this out before, but it's inescapable now that they're here, they're a force to be reckoned with, and everybody who's in the business of trying to get progressive conversations going in this town has got to be impressed by what they've done so far.
A good place to be seen and not heard. Errol Lewis of New York One, co-editor of the new book, Deadline Artists, America's Greatest Newspaper Columns. Great thanks again, Errol.
Thank you.
Protesters have been criticized for not specifying their demands and thus being dismissed as merely anti-bailout or upset about unemployment or something. Today, Occupy Wall Street issued a statement that transcended demands, focusing more on the breadth of what must change in the relationship between people and corporations. And it reads in part, as we gather together in solidarity to express a feeling of mass injustice, we must not lose sight of what brought us together. We write so that all people who feel wronged by the corporate forces of the world can know that we are your allies. We come to you at a time when corporations which place profit over people, self-interest over justice, and oppression over equality run our governments. We have peaceably assembled here, as is our right, to let these facts be known. As promised, I'll be reading that entire statement. It's about 4 minutes in length later in the news hour. Right now, let's bring in John Samuelson, the president of the TWU Local 100, most of whose 38,000 members are New York Transit employees. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thanks for having me.
What made your union associate itself with these protests?
I think the main thrust of the protest on Wall Street boils down to joblessness and wealth disparity. And those are two issues, of course, that Local 100 and the Transport Workers Union would hold dearly and would rail against.
To what degree was your union galvanized by what happened over the weekend when the NYPD essentially impressed everybody into service, the people who drove the buses, to take those 700 arrestees away from Brooklyn Bridge?
Well, we had pledged support to the protest before that happened.
Indeed you did.
But to tell you the truth, it was very irritating to me that the NYPD would board our buses and commandeer them and force our operators to transport prisoners.
Yeah.
And prisoners who should have never been arrested to begin with.
What's your estimation in terms of national support from your union or other unions with which you're familiar?
I think national support is growing rapidly. Other Transport Workers Union locals were present today in force, and other Transport Workers Union locals across the country were in force in different protests.
If there's one thing somebody from the TWU would know in this city, it's people. It's knowing the impact of things in New York City that happen to people. You may have just heard Errol Lewis say that his estimation would be that this march today, as part of the whole thing, would have hit New York like a 2x4, because it didn't have a, we want this right now. It wasn't a strike threat. It wasn't, forgive me, but it wasn't a union protest. It wasn't a somebody's celebration day parade. It was just people saying this is wrong, this has got to change. What did you think of it?
I thought it was tremendous today. To understate the union's involvement today would not be correct. Everybody turned out in force to support the protests at Wall Street. We now recognize that, well, first of all, let me just say this. The folks at Wall Street provided a spark for the rest of organized labor. We should have been doing this 2.5 years ago. The same old thing that we've been doing, talking to politicians in the corridors in Albany and in Washington, D.C., just has not worked for working people. Taken to the streets.
Yep.
It's working.
Something I used to get hit with like 5 years ago when I started doing the commentaries that I did was that more than what I was saying, the thing that seemed to resonate with people was, I'm not alone. There's somebody else who feels like this too.
Yeah.
Is that what's going on here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think more than anything, the Wall Street protesters feel that they're not alone. The force of organized labor is behind them. As one of the commentators said today, one of the speakers, they provide the enthusiasm and we're going to provide the muscle, and that's absolutely true.
All right, explain muscle, because people are going to take that and take it completely out of context.
Well,
muscle from the unions.
Yeah. Well, the New York City labor movement has resources.
Right, resources.
The protesters at Wall Street don't necessarily have resources. We both have many of the same aims, not always, but many of the same aims, and we have the resources to take it further.
John Samuelson, the president of TWU Local 100. Great, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
I like your hat.
Well, that's for you.
Thank you kindly. I know that's Mr. Quill.
Yeah.
The 10,000 busman man. All right, thanks for coming in.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right.